Hello my loves, continue to update new stories on Reddit, and don't forget if you like it, please subscribe and like it. Now let's start new stories. Story, I'm sick. I, 21-year-old, have always been small, malnourished, dehydrated, and weak. I've been underweight and under height averages my whole life. I started puberty around age 14 with my first period, and I had finally reached a normal, albeit on the shorter side, height and a normal and healthy weight. Last month I went to an urgent care because I had been feeling fatigued, sluggish, constipated and depressed. I actually went to the urgent care several months ago for abdominal pain, which turned out to be extreme constipation, and I wanted to know what was wrong with me. I thought I might have been pregnant, but a home test was negative a month before, so I wasn't sure. They did blood work and diagnosed me with hypothyroidism. I've been doing research on it a lot recently and thinking about it. My primary care doctor doesn't seem to really know much about what he diagnosed me with, Hashimoto's disease, and had no treatments for me because he didn't want to give me medication. My blood work showed my hypothyroidism was fluctuating between low and normal, and didn't show grounds for medication yet. Some of the symptoms are fatigue, sluggishness, sensitivity to cold, dry skin, increased sleepiness, constipation, muscle weakness, aches, stiffness, joint stiffness, pain, irregular excessive menstrual bleeding, depression, problems with memory, concentration, puffy face, reduced libido. I've experienced all of these for years. The first time I can pinpoint it was around age 12, where the doctors told me I had low blood iron and I had to drink liquidized iron, take iron pills. I remember it tasted awful and it took months and months for me to feel better. This started because of a pattern of incidents at school, a 4 to 5 month period where every morning I was nauseous, sluggish, overheating and in some cases threw up. The exact incident that pushed my mom to take me to the doctor was when I was walking downstairs at school, sat down at the top of the stairs, laid down and threw up yellow bile all over the floor. I was sent home. When walking outside to the car, I had to sit at least 4 times because I felt so faint. After my first period I started feeling the problems with memory, joint pain/stiffness, muscle weakness, and an extremely reduced libido. Not that I was sexually active, but I had absolutely no sex drive and was not taking any medications as a teen. Since then I feel like I've just been existing. Standing for long periods of time makes me feel faint and my legs hurt. In the morning, almost every morning, I feel nauseous and lightheaded as soon as I stand up/sit up. It's not always bad, but I've had a lifelong problem with this. I'm going to have a lifelong problem with this. I'm so scared for my future, for my relationship's future, and my future kids. I have no idea what my life is going to look like. I've had a few years where I felt normal, but I've had years, months where I felt practically disabled. This does not help that I've struggled with depression, anxiety, autism, and ADHD my entire life. I know there are people with much harder lives, illnesses, and situations, and I'm very lucky to be functional enough to keep a job and even go to school, which I started last month, but it's already feeling like too much sometimes. I'm just so upset. I'm 21 and I have never felt like a healthy normal young person. I can't exercise for too long or do sports because I feel nauseous and physically weak, as well as wheezing often, and I can't eat certain foods because of sensory issues. I'm most upset because my primary care doctor told me the only treatments are meditation and berry smoothies a couple times a week. I hate berries, but I'm willing to eat them. But meditation as a medical treatment for an autoimmune disorder? I seriously don't understand that. Story, my sister asked her deadbeat, absentee birth father to walk her down the aisle, instead of the man who raised her. I, 16-year-old, don't even know where to start with the shitstorm that was my sister's, Tiffany, 27-year-old, half-sister actually, wedding this past weekend. I've got to give the background for any of this to make sense. So my mom, Cassidy, 51-year-old, was married to this loser, Jeff, for like 5 years. He was my sister's dad. They got divorced when she was 3. He was in and out of her life until she was 7 when he just disappeared. My mom married my dad, Clark, 58-year-old, when Tiff was 7 also, after 2 years of dating. I came around about 4 years later. I have always kind of looked up to my sister, even though we are not that close really. She was always nice to me, but I mean she's 11 years older, so we never really played together, and my parents didn't have her watch me very often. I was 7 when she left for college, so like, we're just close-ish, but maybe could be closer if we weren't so far apart age-wise. Now, this is all my mom has told me about Jeff. I guess when they were dating in college, Jeff seemed awesome. Senior year, my mom and Jeff got married in a big wedding paid for by Jeff's dad. My mom says he worked really hard in college, even though he did like to party and really liked to get high back then. Mom was totally in party mode too, so they just worked. It wasn't until they graduated that things changed. Turns out, the only reason Jeff was working so hard was because it was a stipulation of his inheritance. His dad is loaded. Now, while Jeff wasn't getting the money immediately, Jeff's dad made it clear to him and his brothers that a college degree was mandatory to get their trusts, and if they had that and a family, they'd get the money when they turned 30 or 40, or something. So Jeff had the college degree and was married to my mom. My mom said after college, he never really tried to get a job. My mom got a good one right away. Jeff bounced in and out of jobs, but mostly just lived off my mom, smoked pot, and was determined to have a kid. A year in, my mom did get pregnant with Tiff. Mom said Jeff turned into pure worthless at this point. My mom got a good promotion at about this time too. She said it was good she did, because even though Jeff was at home all the time, he couldn't be trusted with Tiff on his own, and she had to pay for daycare. It seemed like Jeff had met his life goal and was just waiting to cash in on his dad's deal. My mom said she tried pressing him to do anything, but he never would. At that point she had enough and divorced him. Over the next 4 years he was in and out of her life. He totally sucked as a dad. He would no-show when it was time to pick up Tiff, bring her back early. He would not have food at home, or he would ask my mom for money. She would usually give it to him because she didn't want Tiff going without. Like I said, my dad married my mom when Tiff was 7. From all I've ever noticed, my dad and Tiff had a good relationship. My mom always let him be the fun parent with her, neither is the fun parent with me, just kidding, sort of, but there were a few times in there when he had to be the bad guy. But I know he coached her youth teams, he always took her dress shopping and let her get whatever she wanted. I guess they're expensive? Anyway, by time I could remember anything, Tiff always called my dad, Dad. My mom said in the 18 years Jeff was missing he sent her 2 birthday cards. One when she was 8, so probably the first one after he left, and then again when she was 14, and that one was 9 weeks late. So for much of her life my dad was just as much her only dad. Then 2 years ago Jeff showed up again. For 6 months he was around and trying to get to know Tiff. For whatever reason she let him right into her life. Then, he just disappeared again for another 6 months. A year ago, Jeff showed up again, and this time stayed. He appears to be clean and sober. Anyway, Tiff has been including him in all the wedding planning. Which has had my parents annoyed. They have to be around Jeff this much, especially since he only bring his opinion to the table and nothing else. My parents have paid for everything. On top of this, Tiff has started calling Dad, stepdad when we are around others. She still just calls him Dad if it's just us, but stepdad everywhere else. This came to a head as the wedding approached. The biggest issue has been that Tiff would not state who she wants to do things like walk her down aisle, father/daughter dance, give the speech, etc. She kept saying she will go over all that at the rehearsal dinner. My mom has been reminding her all about Jeff's role in her life, and my dad's role in her life. She didn't get the hint. I knew going into the wedding my parents were going to be pissed, because it really seemed like she was going to split these up and have Jeff do some of them. We got to the rehearsal dinner on Thursday. Everyone was assembled, and Tiff started going over the roles for the wedding. That's when she said that she wanted Jeff to do all the traditional father things at the wedding. I could see the hurt on my dad's face and the anger on my mom's. But I was not prepared for what happened next. My mom stood up and said, "Why would you pick him for any of that? He's barely been in your life." Everyone got quiet. Tiff, after a moment, said, "We've missed out on a lot of time. I want to start building memories. I don't know why you have to do this now. It's important to me to have these traditions with my real father." That's when the bombshell hit. "Then you should pick Clark, because he is your real father." My sister, starting to cry, said, "What are you talking about?" At this point my dad pulled a few folded sheets of paper out. It was results of a paternity test from when my sister was 3 years old. It clearly showed that my dad was actually Tiffany's biological father. Jeff got his hands on a copy and screamed, "What the fuck is this, you cheap whore?" My mom fired back, "Oh please, the second we graduated I figured out you were a worthless loser, and you've proven that over and over again throughout the years. You faked who you were and wasted years of my life. I have my reasons for everything that's happened and don't have to explain myself to you, Jeff. And it's not like you ever figured out or noticed anything anyway. God, I hate you. If you had just stayed away everything would have been fine. Well, hopefully now you'll go away and stay gone. Have no reason to stay now and you can just go back and drink and smoke yourself to death in whatever gutter you choose." At this point Tiffany and her fiancé left, with her in tears. Other guests were in total shock, and Jeff was seething. He charged at my mom and dad, which was terrible decision. Jeff is maybe 5 feet 10 inches, and has the body of a guy who has been drinking and smoking for the last 30 years. My dad is like 6 feet 3 inches and has the body of a guy who has been working out for the last 30 years. The slap my dad delivered across Jeff's face sounded like a sonic boom and literally took Jeff off his feet. And yes, I said that right, slap. Jeff just laid there shook and defeated. My dad said, "Don't do that again, I won't be nice next time." At that point my parents came over and asked me if I minded to ride home with my grandparents. They needed a bit of time to themselves. I said that was fine. I didn't hear anything until the next day. Jeff disappeared again, and no one has seen him since. My parents called me and told me they wouldn't be attending the wedding, but that I should support my sister. They had talked to Tiffany, she was a mess, and asked they not attend at all. My parents said to me that they understood that decision and didn't want to ruin this any further. My parents did not explain any more of the situation to me. The wedding did happen on Saturday. I ended up walking Tiffany down the aisle and most of the guests still came. The only ones who didn't were the few members of Jeff's family that are SVP'd, and my parents. The ceremony was nice and all, but you could just tell my sister was sad. She did her best to enjoy the day, but it was noticeably difficult for her. They left for their honeymoon the day after. I decided to stay with my grandparents this whole time everything was happening. I'm back home today, and my parents told me they'll tell me everything I want to know. I'm not even sure what I want to know, this whole thing is just crazy. Hopefully, I'll get a shot to update everyone at some point, maybe when Tiff gets back. I don't know if this is the update everyone wants. Tiff is still not back from her honeymoon, but I did ask my parents about the stuff at the rehearsal. Took me a few days to work up the nerve. For those of you who guessed it was all about money, you get the rainbow sticker on your chart. After a year of being married and Jeff doing nothing. My mom told him she wanted a divorce. Jeff knew his dad would never give him anything if he got divorced, at least not anytime soon. He begged my mom to stay just until he got the money, then they'd divorce and she would get half. My mom agreed. However, she also decided she was divorced in her mind. She began going out, and that is where she met my dad and began seeing him behind Jeff's back. I asked why all the secrecy if you were both just in it for the money, and she said it was because if she was caught being unfaithful she figured Jeff might have a reason to divorce her without falling out with his father. She messed up and got pregnant by my dad. I asked wouldn't Jeff know it wasn't his, if you were just faking the marriage. She said this is probably TMI, but once I knew I was pregnant, I took a few for the team. Gross, when Tiff was born Jeff went on the birth certificate. She waited 3 years in hopes of getting that money until she had her fill and divorced him. She hadn't given up though. She knew Jeff was a fuck up and likely would never get his life together. So if she kept up with the hoax, that Tiff was his daughter, then maybe Tiff could get the money. My mom said this ended up being a long con, which she only said to sound cool. I know she learned that term from watching Lost. Luckily, Jeff's dad was not a present grandparent. He didn't want to see her ever. Mom said he's one of those children are to be seen, not heard types of people. She would send him pictures and letters of all of Tiff's accomplishments. When Jeff just disappeared from their lives, she kept it up. It took another 8 years, but she eventually convinced this man, who by this point had totally given up on his son, to give Jeff's share to Tiff. It was $350,000. Tiff was 15 by this point, and Jeff's father was still around. My mom feared some sort of legal repercussions if the truth came out, so she never said anything. Jeff had been gone for 8 years. Tiff and our dad had really bonded. She had been calling him dad for years by this point. My mom said she was wrong but to not tell Tiff at some point, but with all the things I said above she thought all was going fine, no need to mess it up. The money was all spent on Tiff. It covered her 4.5 years of college, plus grad school, and new car when she graduated HS, rent when she moved out of the dorms after freshman year, and a monthly allowance of mad money. The remainder was used for the wedding and honeymoon. My parents make good money, but we aren't rich. Jeff's dad died about 2.5 years ago. My mom knows that Jeff went for his inheritance and found out it had already been given to Tiff. That was the first 6 months he was back and trying to be in her life. My mom told me after about 6 months he asked my mom about it and she told him it was all gone. That's when he disappeared again. She had hoped this was the last they would ever hear from him. My mom decided it had been so long she was just going to let the lie stay. She regrets that now, but figured why disrupt everyone's harmony. But then Jeff came back and has been around the whole year. He just won't seem to leave. Tiff kept getting closer. My mom kept hoping he would eventually just fuck up or disappear, but it didn't happen. When my dad started to get cut out, it upset them, and they said they both made a poor decision, but they wanted Jeff gone. They'd hoped Tiff would pick my dad, and when that didn't happen they outed the whole thing. They regret the wedding situation, and not telling her long ago, but know what's done is done. They said they'll do everything to make it up to her when she returns, and need me to continue being a good brother to her. It has been the weirdest week and a half ever. My sister was set to get back from her honeymoon this morning, and she is coming by today to talk to our parents. We've had some relatives call and ask about everything that happened. My mom has been telling them most of the truth. She is grossly downplaying the money part. Most think she is horrible for leaving Jeff in our lives, and not letting her know that my dad, Clark, was her bio dad the whole time. I actually think if my sister decides to cut off my parents, they will too. I don't know right now. I'm obviously still going to be here until college, but I might too if Tiff does. Jeff is dead. We got notified earlier this week by one of Jeff's brothers. He said he was only contacting my mom as a courtesy to Tiffany, and asked she not find out until after her honeymoon. Then stated this would be the last time anyone from his family would ever be contacted. The apparent cause was drug overdose. Jeff was found in his hotel room right after the wedding weekend with several empty vials of prescription drugs and several empty bottles of alcohol. My parents have been anxious all day. They're making me anxious. I can't wait for Tiff to get here so we can get this over with. Update: my sister got here a few hours ago. She walked into our living room. My parents were standing there. My sister looked at them and said, "Did it work?" My parents started nodding, then everyone began smiling and hugging. She said, "Great plan, Mom." I was so damn confused. Mom then started, "Yep, OD, just like we figured. Your dad did good getting the spiked booze into his room." Tiff: "Yeah, how'd you pull that off without him noticing?" Dad: "Seriously? Guy was such an idiot and so out of it all the time he wouldn't have noticed if I left a live bear in there. When we went up to his room together just before the rehearsal dinner, so I could give him money to give to you as a wedding present, I just pulled the bottles out of my pockets and put it in the mini fridge with rest of his booze and dropped the empty vials around the room, while he fumbled around looking for his cigarettes." Mom: "How much was the policy worth?" Tiff, $565,000, new house here I come. Mom, I'm so happy for you baby, you deserve it. Tiff, yeah I do, 2 years of dealing with that loser, cleaning him up, listening to his sob stories, he's always the victim, ugh, my skin crawled when I had to hug him. Mom, no clauses in it about overdose or anything? Tiff, no I made sure of that when I took him to get the policy, moron would have signed anything I put in front him. This is when I chimed in, what did he sign? Tiff responded, a life insurance policy, with me as the beneficiary. She turned back to our parents, I'm just so sad you guys couldn't be at the wedding, it was nice having Tim, that's me, walk me down the aisle and we got some good pictures, but I wanted you both there so bad, it did help me look sad for the guests though Dad. I know sweetie, but we will stick to the plan, we spend this year low contact while we reconcile then next year we do the small beach redo wedding with all of us. Adam, sister's husband, will be okay with that? Tiff, yeah, he will do anything for me, he's the sweetest best guy ever. Oh, and then, can you finally legally adopt me? I already got rid of Jeff's last name, though I'm sad I never got to be a Malcolm, our last name. But can we finally get him off my birth certificate? Dad, for sure Mom, oh it feels so good to be done, 5 years wasted on that guy, I never got 1 cent of child support, all the times I had to give him money. You were the only good thing that came out of my poor college decisions. I chimed in again here, wait, I'm confused again, is Dad not her bio dad? They all looked at me puzzled, my dad said, no, Bud, I'm her stepdad, I didn't even meet your mom until she was 5. I responded, then who's Tiff's bio dad? Dad, Jeff, Tim, don't be a dumbass. Then they all laughed, my sister came over and hugged me and said something about catching on. Then they all laughed, my mom reminded my sister about no contact for the next month, then Tiff left. I've been in my room since, I made the mistake of watching some horrible Netflix show about a guy who burned his family alive on Christmas. So now I'm extra on edge. My mind is total mush. I am so disenfranchised. Really leaning towards out-of-state college. Story, a quick story about my husband. Me, 38 years old, and my daughter, 5 years old. When my daughter was born, my husband, 33-year-old, went above and beyond with everything. I had a cesarean section, and it took me a while to recover. Our daughter was born a month before Father's Day, and we couldn't do anything fun on Father's Day since I was recovering. My husband was so amazing. I was essentially just changing and feeding our daughter and going to the bathroom. My husband was doing everything else while also giving me breaks and taking care of our daughter. Honestly, I felt a little useless. I could tell it was starting to wear on him, but he didn't show it. He always smiled and assured me he was okay. On Father's Day, every time our daughter started fussing, I'd try to get up to take care of her, but he kept getting up and telling me he would take care of her. I felt so terrible since he spent his first Father's Day taking care of our daughter and doing pretty much everything else while I sat around all day. The night of Father's Day, our daughter was asleep, and I apologized for not doing anything for him. I felt so bad that I was almost crying. My husband hugged me and assured me I didn't have to apologize. I remember exactly what he said. He said, "Honey, you don't have to be sorry. You're still recovering. You need all the rest you can get. I love you so much, and your health matters more than a day." My husband went back to work once I was fully recovered, and he was still so amazing with helping out with our daughter. Since my husband was working, I'd get up at night when our daughter needed us, and when he got home from work, he'd always take our daughter so I could get some sleep. 5 years later, he's still an amazing dad. Our daughter's a daddy's girl, and it's the cutest thing ever. Every now and then, I see posts like the one I read where the husband and wife aren't getting along after their baby is born, and I think about how much I love my husband and how lucky I am that he's been so amazing with our daughter. I hear about couples whose love fades after a while, and I feel so lucky because my husband and I are still madly in love after 13 years. Story: the terrible, horrible, awful chat I had with my GF's parents where I couldn't keep my mouth shut. My husband and I have a long-term family friend, John, who is basically the mayor everywhere we go. My children call him Uncle, and we've been this guy's ride-or-die bestie through his first wife, 3 girlfriends, 1 serious relationship, and his new wife. All that to say, given the length of our friendship, we know his family and his other friends. About 10 years ago, John's friend Dave and his wife, Emily, happened to be in the area with their kids and wanted to come hang out with us and several other couples during a beach vacation we were all on together, where several people/couples/families chipped in for rooms of a large beach house. Dave and Emily weren't invited, but just because no one knew them, but we invited John's friends to come hang out all day. Emily ends up talking with me quite a bit. My husband is not in town yet and joining our family the next day, and largely it was nice to have company. We talk almost all afternoon. She's acting as though we are long-lost sisters. Most of the conversation I enjoyed, but it became clear pretty quickly that she didn't really know who she was, what she was doing, and she tried to give me her version of social media therapy on the beach, and after the second beer it was full-on Dr. Phil and difficult to steer the conversation. I was annoyed, but okay. I had an older kid there, so other priorities. It was clear she was very not entirely sober. I choose to not think anything of the conversation missteps. After a fun day of beach drinking and kids playing, it was decided that Dave and Emily couldn't drive and it would just be easier to squeeze them into our beach house for a night. Dave decides to go put his kids to bed in one of the children's bedrooms. He must have passed out because he never returned. This left his wife Emily upstairs hanging out. After an hour more of all the kids in bed and adults upstairs playing cards, Emily decided to show everyone her yoga skills and gets quickly overtly sexual with the men in the room. She starts doing handstand splits on the top of the couch. She's asking some of the guys in the room to help her do couple moves where it takes 2 to get her into the right position. This went on for at least a half hour. At one point, she sits on the shoulders of the younger solo guy on the couch, Sean, and he stood up trying to get her to stop. She ends up spun around his head with her crotch in his face for a split second, and she made some comment about whether he could smell her poocha. Story: the courage to speak. In a quiet suburban neighborhood, a close-knit family often gathered for Sunday dinners. Among the regular attendees was a young boy named Alex, who always seemed a bit withdrawn. Alex was 12 years old, and his cousins, Mike and Lily, often wondered why he rarely smiled and why his eyes held a sadness that no child should bear. One evening, during one of these family gatherings, Mike noticed a bruise on Alex's arm. When he asked about it, Alex shrugged it off, saying he had fallen off his bike. But Mike wasn't convinced. He had seen similar bruises on Alex before, each time with a different explanation. Mike decided to keep a closer eye on Alex. Over the next few weeks, he noticed more bruises and a growing fear in Alex's eyes whenever his father, Uncle Tom, was around. Tom was known to have a short temper, but the extent of his cruelty was something the family hadn't fully realized. One day, after school, Mike found Alex sitting alone in the backyard, staring blankly at the ground. Mike sat down next to him and gently asked, "Alex, what's really going on? You can trust me." Alex hesitated, tears welling up in his eyes. "It's my dad," he finally whispered. "He's always angry. He hits me for everything. I can't do anything right." Mike felt a surge of anger and sadness. He hugged Alex tightly. "You don't deserve this, Alex. We have to tell someone. This can't keep happening." Alex shook his head vigorously. "No, Mike. He'll hurt me even more if he finds out I told anyone. And he'll hurt Mom too." Mike felt a knot in his stomach. He knew he had to do something, but he also understood Alex's fear. He decided to talk to his own parents first, hoping they would know how to handle the situation. That evening, Mike approached his parents, John and Mary, and told them everything Alex had shared. They listened intently, their faces growing more concerned with each passing moment. "We need to help him," Mike insisted. "We can't just ignore this." John nodded. "You're right, Mike. We can't let this go on. We'll talk to Alex's mom, and if necessary, we'll involve the authorities. But we have to be careful." The next day, John and Mary invited Alex's mother, Aunt Lisa, over for coffee. As they talked, they gently broached the subject of Tom's temper and the possibility of abuse. Lisa initially denied it, but as tears filled her eyes, she finally admitted the truth. "He's been like this for years," Lisa confessed. "I thought I could manage it, that it would get better. But it's only gotten worse. I'm terrified for Alex, but I don't know how to leave. I don't know where to go." Mary took Lisa's hand. "You don't have to do this alone. There are shelters and organizations that can help. We will support you every step of the way." With John and Mary's help, Lisa contacted a local domestic violence shelter. They provided her with resources and a plan to leave safely. Lisa gathered the courage to take action, knowing she had the support of her extended family. One evening, while Tom was out, Lisa packed their essentials and left with Alex to the shelter. It was a difficult and emotional step, but she knew it was the right one. The shelter provided them with a safe place to stay, counseling, and legal assistance. Tom was furious when he found out, but the restraining order kept him at bay. Lisa filed for divorce and sought custody of Alex. The process was long and challenging, but with the support of her family and the shelter, she remained steadfast. Alex struggled with the trauma of his father's abuse, but with therapy and the loving support of his mother and cousins, he began to heal. He found solace in activities he enjoyed, like drawing and playing soccer. Slowly, his laughter returned, and the fear in his eyes faded. Years later, Alex stood before a group of children and parents at a community center, sharing his story. "I was afraid to speak up, but my cousin Mike helped me find the courage. No one deserves to live in fear. If you're being hurt, tell someone you trust. There is help, and there is hope." His words resonated deeply with the audience, many of whom were facing similar struggles. Alex's journey from a life of fear to one of empowerment inspired others to seek help and break free from the chains of abuse. Alex and his family had come a long way, and their story was a powerful reminder of the importance of speaking out and supporting one another. In the end, the courage to speak had not only saved Alex but had also given him a platform to help others find their own voice. Story: I hate my fucking dad. After I got married to my, now, ex-husband, we moved to his hometown after he separated from the military. We both served and are both veterans. It took me a while to even find friends outside of his family. When our second oldest child entered pre-K, I made my very first friend and we're still very good friends to this day. 10 years later, our oldest child was taking self-defense class and that's where I met the side chick for the first time. Her child was also taking the same class. Her husband was taking the adult classes. I'm pretty much an introvert, so I tend to keep to myself, and I haven't made any other friends within those 10 years. We became friends real quick, and I was so excited that I told my ex-husband. He expressed how happy he was for me, but now that I think about it, he was happy for himself. Fast forward another 2 years when quarantine was going into effect. Her husband's health started to decline and he was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. We were there for them because we were treating each other like family at this point. Her husband passed away while I was away with my kids. My ex was acting a certain type of way that made me suspicious. When we all got back home, things gradually went south. They kept looking close. He was making her laugh all the time. When I'd show up to her house unannounced, to my surprise, he'd be there for haircuts or helping her out. One time she changed her very revealing top to a more modest t-shirt that covered up the girls. I became more suspicious when he would get upset when other guys would talk to her. They were always chatting and talking over me while I was in the middle and it made me feel so uncomfortable. I finally started laying down some boundaries. I told him that he needed to stop talking to her and I told him to not even call or text my friend unless he needed to contact me. He got upset and said that she was his friend too and that he wasn't going to stop being friends with her. He also said that I was just being jealous. He said that I didn't trust him and that if I didn't trust him, I didn't love him. I'll go ahead and skip to our 16-year marriage coming to an end because I was jealous and unstable, that's what he told everyone. His family called BS and he said that I turned his whole family against him when I hadn't even told them my side of the story at that point. Only a few of my closest family members on my side knew what was going on. His family who did reach out to me though, know my side and are on my side. They all knew what kind of guy he was before he met me and were surprised that we were even married because they said that he was an AH. After him telling everyone that nothing was going on, after our divorce was finalized, it didn't take long for them to announce their relationship. Soon he would move into the home her late husband had bought her. What's even more twisted is he recently purchased that house so that he can be the primary owner. He had this chick befriend me so that our kids could be friends. Or maybe she befriended me to see what I was all about? I will never truly know, but I'm okay. I've had time to heal and I just recently started dating again. My heart was ripped out, stomped on, I was stabbed in the back and the rose-colored glasses were ripped off my face, but I couldn't be more grateful. I can't say that I am living my best life, but I am living a better life. I apologize for the confusion. When my ex told me that he wouldn't stop being her friend, that's when I first wondered if she was even my friend. I did ask her once if he was being inappropriate towards her or made her feel uncomfortable. She got super defensive and asked me, why does this always happen? Why does everyone think that she's trying to steal their man? I was confused and asked her what does she mean because I asked about him. She changed gears and said that he didn't make her uncomfortable and that he is a total gentleman and she saw him as a brother. I was told that she was never my friend by others and that a real friend wouldn't entertain someone else's husband like she had been. Many red flags were there, I was just too naive. Also, I know that this sounds unbelievable. I was in therapy because I couldn't make this stuff up. It seems that the pandemic was a catalyst for many with similar stories to mine. Thank you for your positive words, I sincerely appreciate it. To be clear, they didn't suddenly get close after her husband passed, their actions just became more noticeable. She used to call me up and if my ex was next to me, he'd hijack my phone and have a whole conversation with her. They were texting each other without my knowledge before her husband passed. I only found out by chance. Story, I, 30M, hit my father, 51M, for a past mistake. I am from Peru, from a provincial city. When I was 18 years old, my cousin, who is the same age as mine, accused me of having raped her. She and I were very close since we were children, since we used to spend time together. Due to family problems, she began to have depression. It wasn't like before. Now all she did was scream, get angry, or even blame me because I didn't have the same problems as her. The truth is I was trying to help her, but my own mental health was beginning to deteriorate, so I decided little by little to move away. Months passed and I had no contact with her until one day my father came to my house and called me. I went out to meet him and he received me with a slap in the face. It should be noted that my father had never hit me before. Who did that was my mother, and only for specific reasons. When I asked him about the reason behind the hit, he slapped me again and told me to get out of the house, that his brother, my cousin's father, had told him that my cousin said that I raped her and that's why she was so depressed. Apparently her dad realized that she was cutting herself, and to get out of it she just blamed me for everything. My cousin didn't press charges, obviously because there is no proof, but still my dad told me that my uncle wanted to beat me up. My dad was disappointed in me. He hit me again, called me an abuser, insulted me and told me to get out of his house. My mom was always a submissive person with him, so she didn't say anything to him. I simply, with my lip bleeding, grabbed my most valuable things and left. Thank God I had my savings on my card from what I had worked for, and I was able to go to the capital by public transportation. Once in the capital, I managed to rent a small room. I had a bad time for the next few years. I had a couple or two for a few years and jumping from job to job to survive. When I was 20 years old, my partner at that time told me that I could work at the KFC where she worked as a delivery order receptionist. The part-time job paid well, and with the bonuses you could even earn double or triple my salary, so I worked there doing the best I could while studying a technical degree in administration. Years passed and I ended up becoming a supervisor and then manager of that store thanks to my technical degree in business administration. At the age of 25, I became a partner with a former university classmate with whom I still had contact. She is a lawyer, and the age of 27 we got married. It was a small wedding because both she and I are modest with expenses and because I had no family to invite. We currently have a 1-year-old son whom I love with all my soul. It was after this that everything went to hell. Today in the middle of the afternoon there was a knock at my door. It was my parents. It had been more than a decade since I had seen them. I was frozen, but not with fear, but with anger. My dad asked me if he could come in. I told him no, so we talked in a nearby park. In short, they told me that my cousin had committed suicide and that in her letter she confessed the whole truth, that the person who actually abused her was her mother's brother, and that everything was orchestrated by him to be able to cover up and other things. The truth is I was very indifferent. For me, whoever accuses of those crimes deserves to suffer them in flesh, so I didn't feel sorry for her. I told them kindly, and resisting my urge to yell at them, to go away and never contact me again, that they were dead to me. When I stood up from the bench to go home, my dad grabbed me by the shoulder. He told me that we have to keep talking. I told him no. He insisted. I told him no. He insisted again. So I turned around and instinctively gave him a hit. I don't know when my dad became so weak. Any Latino knows that countrymen are quite strong, but one hit was enough to break his nose. He stood stunned looking at me with his eyes open and his nose bleeding, and my mom was covering her mouth, for some reason that I don't explain. My next reaction was to throw myself at him. It wasn't difficult to knock him to the ground and I continued hitting him. When he started to cover his face, I started hitting his head or forehead. I'll not lie, it felt liberating. I felt like I was crying while I hit him, and I continued until my right hand was hurting. My mother stood still. For some reason she didn't do anything. She just stood there watching and crying. By that time it was already night, and in our area it was difficult to find people on the street, even less so considering that today there is a soccer game. My mom helped my dad and took a taxi. She didn't say anything to me. She didn't scream. She just cried, and as soon as she grabbed my dad she ran away. I'm not lying. If she had tried to intervene, maybe she would have gotten the same treatment. A few hours later my mother writes to me on my cell phone. Apparently they contacted a friend from university. I still have my social networks active, who told them where I lived, saying that my father needs a septum reconstruction because it was perforated in dental reconstruction for having 4 broken teeth. Everything was going to cost the equivalent of $4,000, which is a lot of money here. Not a fortune, but it's a lot. I have already been clear with her. I am not going to put in a single cent. For my sake, she and my dad could end up just like my cousin. I don't care. She has been calling me, asking for forgiveness for everything, that she wants to come back into my life, that she was afraid and that she should have protected me or at least believed me. According to her, my dad felt the same, and according to him he deserves every hit I gave him. I guess we agree on that. I told my wife everything. She already knew what happened in the past with my parents. She just told me that she understood that, according to what I told her, my father died when he kicked me out of his house, so who did I hit was just a stranger with his face. I found her comparison funny and I agreed with her. She told me that if they tried legal measures we would simply say that it was in self-defense. A law was recently passed in which lethal force can even be used when it's about self-defense, so if something happens to him we can rely on that. Right now I'm glad I have a lawyer wife. I can't help but feel more liberated after this. My parents aren't poor so I know they'll get the money for the operation. I hope they just aren't idiots enough to come back to my house. This is my home now, and if I have to beat them both to get the hell out of my life, I will. At the end of the day, they are the ones who started all this. I was just defending myself. I still feel a little euphoric and happy. The truth is, I am a little happy that they are suffering. They deserve it. I am happy with my life and my family, and I would protect them at any cost. That includes my parents. I needed to get this off my chest somehow, so I'm writing this to release it. Somehow telling it all has made me feel better. Story: I hate fucking dad. I'm a 29-year-old woman, and my husband is 27. He's really into fitness and goes to the gym regularly, while I've been struggling to get back in shape after having our baby boy a year ago. Recently, we went on a family holiday with my side of the family. My husband got along really well with everyone, especially my aunt, who's 47 and also very fit. She goes to the gym a lot too. My husband has always had some unusual gym-related fantasies, asking me to do things like lift weights in front of him. After Easter at my grandparents' house, most of the family went to my uncle's place, leaving only a few of us behind. My grandparents have a small, rarely used in-house gym that one of my uncles built. While I was feeding our son, my husband disappeared with my aunt for about half an hour, saying she was going to show him some workout techniques. Feeling uneasy, I asked my mom to watch the baby so I could see what they were up to. I found them in the gym, with my husband lying on the floor and my aunt squatting weights above him, her bum right over his face. Both of them swore they haven't cheated or had sex and begged me not to tell anyone. After speaking to my aunt later, she informed me that my husband wanted me to stand on his balls and squat but refused, saying it was weird. Well, should I divorce my husband? Story: an incomplete portrait of a girl who died. You were never technically given a curfew. You always hated leaving the house, and your mom said this is why you instead had outside hours. So, at 16, when you come home at 3 in the morning, you're surprised to see light pouring out upstairs from the kitchen. A sign she's waiting up. You told her you were going to a bonfire and you likely wouldn't be back until after 2 because your friend would need to sober up to drive you home. Normally this would have placated your mom, but there she is, waiting for you. You suddenly feel elated, and this time it's not just because you're high. You're actually eager for a conversation with your mom, even if she's clearly gearing up to lecture you. You walk upstairs to the kitchen. She's at the table, eyeing you warily. A robe thrown over her pajamas, and her curls spilling messily over her shoulders. Her hair is rarely unstraightened, and you feel closer to her when she leaves it be. So? She asks while you get a glass of water. What? She shakes her head at you and pulls a sour face as if you should know what she means. Did you get my text? Your heart rolls roaring thunder. Every fight mom picks is to the death. It's exhilarating. You never know what's going to be pulled out of you, or what you're going to get from her. Sometimes it's even a little funny, but only to the two of you. You pad your hoodie down. It's winter and you probably need a real coat, but you haven't earned enough from babysitting to buy one yet. Your phone is an ice block in your pocket and you're completely unsurprised that it's dead. Sorry, you shrug at her, phone died. She pouts, and you're confused. She sighs and tightens her robe as you deflate. I asked you to get me Oreos and Pepsi. I was really looking forward to it. She doesn't have anything else to say to you. She goes down to the garage for a smoke. You think about joining her, but you have this aching pit in your stomach. At 12 you are a rabbit. Caught in a trap waiting for the hunter to break your neck. Your eyes are wild. Your eyes are dead. Your grandfather's heart underneath you is almost as frantic as your own. His head turned towards the television. You look at your grandmother lying next to him, and she looks right back at you. Her mouth is a tight line and her eyes are wet. You try to press your thoughts, mostly pleased to get you out of here, into her head. Herman. Your grandmother says with her voice soft and her eyes wandering to his hand at the small of your back. It's time for bed. The next morning he teaches you to shoot. You are surprised by the feel of the gun. Warm as a baby bird and heavy as a stone. It strains your arms and you can't escape the thought that this was made to kill someone. You think of how a bullet rips through flesh when you're eyeing the paper target. You don't want to be here or do this, but what you want hardly matters. When you pull the trigger, the gun kicks back, the sound snaps your ears, your heart beats its fists against your chest, and you miss the fucking shot. You cry. Grandfather says you are weak. You try to breathe, even out, but your eyes wander to the treeline and you cry so hard your throat is raw. You are 5 and your great cousin Michael wraps duct tape around your wrists. He is quiet, intense, and almost reverent in his task. His pale cheeks flushed, watery blue eyes screwed in concentration, and the white blonde hairs on his arms stand up. It's the first time in a couple days you've had someone this focused on you. You watch the motions when you can no longer look at his face. The few glimpses you got were so different from how he usually is. Gone the impish mask of childhood and fixed the stare of a man attempting to break through a 10-year-old. You and he are one in the same. Cycling through your ages the way other children cycle through their moods. You don't say anything, and neither does your great aunt when she opens the car door with a bag of dog food balanced on her hip. You lose most of the summer you're 16 to a friend's bedroom. You and your mom have been fighting, but this has been true for years. You don't even remember why you don't get along, but she always insists you started it. Things that don't change don't matter. Nothing feels like it matters because time doesn't exist in this bedroom. The walls are plain white, the one window is covered up, and you and your friend never sleep when you're supposed to. The two of you alternate between writing, reading, watching movies, and in many ways this is the safest you've felt in years. But there is an edge to this comfort. You had left to stay the night, just one night, last month. You don't particularly enjoy leaving home because you never know when you'll be allowed back. Every time you ask you get the same answers. Let me enjoy my free time. I'm not ready to be a mom again. Just wait until Jonah leaves for the slope, then you can come back. You have not asked to go home in a week. You will not be asking any time soon. You don't usually have anything to say when you're told no anyways. Your friend's mom does eventually, after 2 months, grow tired of being expected to raise someone else's kid. Your mom still doesn't pick you up. Instead she sends Jonah. Jonah is her husband and you have never seen him sober. He is drinking a beer when he pulls into your friend's driveway. You don't want to get in the car with him, but you know you have no other choice. Your mom was pretty clear that if you don't get in the car with him you'll have to figure out your own place to sleep or ride home. It feels like a test. Jonah decides to spend the car ride drinking and talking about how much your mom loves you and your younger sibling. Every adult in your life feels the need to remind you of this and it gets less convincing every time. Jonah doesn't even seem to believe it himself because he suddenly lurches into a new conversation. About parents, and disappointment, and how in the end we fall into certain patterns. For him it was consuming anything in sight that could take him out of his head. He tells you he doesn't want you to go there. Your stomach aches thinking about the things you've already done. You wonder which part of the car you'll be sitting in at his age. 9-year-olds are not supposed to want to die. You know this because your mom told you that was the age when she first had suicidal thoughts. You know this because now you are 9 and you fantasize about death almost every day. You were told by the school to see a therapist even though you never admitted your thoughts to anyone. Your mom doesn't like your therapist. Your mom says she is delusional and focuses too much on your mom and not enough on the absence of your biological father. After every session, your mom rants on and on about how this woman can't know you, doesn't have the facilities to help you, and will make you worse than you already are. Privately, you think that you enjoy seeing your therapist because every time you see her, there is 1 hour of your day just about you. You only get it once a week, and for a while you enjoy it. But when you start to feel close to her, something strange happens. She sees you off like she always does, and your stomach drops. Your brain forces a horrifying thought that this is all a ruse, an excuse to touch you, and as you turn away in shame, you simultaneously cycle through images of her touching you. You ask your mom to stop seeing your therapist. Every reason you give is something your mom said. She is so triumphant it makes your throat tight. You can't remember anyone else touching you before, but you are so certain it will happen again. 16 is the first time you get drunk. You are stranded in your friend's room and still about a month away from going home. You're not worried about being drunk around your friend. You are worried about your thoughts. Vaults in your mind groan against the memories locked away in them. They feel ancient and forbidden, yawning and exhausted from the effort of withholding. You can pick apart different sections of your early childhood memories. Things that had not been accessible to you at home, where you are always worried or angry or hurt. None of them make sense. Each of them is behind a camcorder lens that makes them feel unreal. You remember watching Power Rangers after daycare at a friend's house. The bonfire your great-aunt made to melt all of your cousin's treasures that were too similar to witchcraft. Cheyenne. Herman. Michael. It takes so many sips before you feel drunk. Before those memories slip into the tightly locked vaults you keep in your head. There is no freedom, but there is some strange emptiness, and that alone brings you so much relief. I don't like being alone with him. You say at 5 years old one night over the fire, while your mom and your great-aunt and uncle balance stemless wine glasses on the arms of their camping chairs. You are of course talking about your grandfather, who is not really your grandfather. It's the touching, right? Asks your cousin, Michael, the blonde one. His expression urges you to continue. Every adult circled around the fire goes still except your mom. Your great-uncle, your great-aunt, and your uncle's faces harden under the warm glow. The only one here with any blood relation to you is your mother, and on some level you're aware that she sets the tone for how they all respond to you. The sun hovers over you, and your other brunette cousin pokes at the fire with sharp sticks. The lake shimmers in the distance and the trees whistle in the wind. Your blonde cousin stares at you from over the fire. He is thinner, paler, perceived more feminine than the other, and his watery blue eyes twinkle with a recognition that makes you uncomfortable. Yeah. You admit softly, and your entire body tenses when your mom's cackle echoes off the trees. She stares right at you. Her face twists between agony and joy and anger. Her cheeks in the full blush of booze and her eyes alight with a mischief that almost seems innocent. In these moments she's much more child than mother, and you know without knowing that she's not seeing you. Well, Herman does like M. Young. Cheyenne, your great-aunt's face is strained and her voice is soft. It's true. Your mom spins and rounds to your uncle. He loses interest when they hit puberty. She says something else, and no matter when you try to recount it, the moment is lost. Your great-aunt tries to shush your mom and your uncle walks away without saying a word. Your mom needs to be consoled, and if you speak now you're just taking another thing away from her. In between your great-aunt and uncle's home and your grandparents' home is a stretch of woods. They made a path illuminated by Christmas lights. At night you dream of this stretch. The branches reach out and whip across your face, the roots come up and trip you as you try to make your escape, and every time you try to get up the world spins and spins and spins until you fall back down. You hear beasts growling in the woods and you feel teeth close around your ankles and you try to scream but nothing comes out. You have this dream until you're 27 years old. Story, regrets, and isolation. Today's the birthday of my late father. I used to call him Baba, the Bengali term for father. It's not that I was waiting for this day, I just woke up in the middle of the night for the washroom, and after I tried to get back into my pity dreams, I was struck by today's date of September 1st. Initially I was like, something's today, but I can't remember what exactly it is, not long before I realized it was the birthday of one of my loved ones, who loved me back. Well, I'm a 30-year-old guy based in Bengaluru, recently left my only job where I was earning just 5.6 LPA per month, not enough for me to live a decent life in such an expensive city. Now I left it, so what's ahead? Nothing I know of, don't have any contacts to support me in this situation. I always had colleagues and no friends back at work, owing to the social skills that got me here. Now with no job, no friends, no family, well actually I realized no one cares about my existence. Well, I wasn't like that always. Rewind 10 years, to my college life at one of the most prestigious universities, pursuing one of the most lucrative streams, computer science. I had friends back then even though I struggled to start conversations. My poor social skills, often pointed out by others, were one of my worries, but no matter how I tried, I failed. I accept the fact that I didn't get the best of friends because of this. All I got were extremely competitive or extremely light friends. I got trapped in between, was never able to scam my life, and just got pushed and crushed by the crowd. During my time at college, I had a loving family, but unfortunately, I didn't realize their importance in my life. Calling them every day at 9:30 was like a task that needed to be done. Never talked nicely to them, not like I was very arrogant or whatever, it was like I just answered whatever they asked in a yes/no manner, telling nothing about what was going on with me, or any interesting stories that they expected from me. Unlike my friends who were fully frank and expressive with their parents, I didn't feel right that time to share anything, for as I expected I might get a scolding in return, like lying to them about having food a mess. When things got worse in life, with poor academic performance and poor relationships, instead of getting emotional support from them, I did the opposite. I felt I could handle everything independently, and I stopped talking to them after repetitive missed calls, which frustrated me. Used to yell at them, thought they wouldn't be of any help to get me out of here. My parents were very sad at that time, not because he had to pay hefty fees despite my poor performance, but only because they weren't able to talk to the playful and honest child that I once used to be. That made my parents emotionally unstable, I guess. I had a small brother also, who grew up watching all these. We shared so much love for each other before I came to college, but now he sees these things happening to his parents. Our bond loosened. It was the 4th year of my college. The second cycle of placement season was going on and I kept getting rejected because of my poor CV and grades. The placements ended, leaving me unemployed. Now I was more hesitant to talk to my parents, ashamed to even show my face to my friends. I thought of how disappointed my parents would be if they got to know about this, as they expected a lot from me before admitting me into this college. Little did I know how worse things were back at home. I got a call from an unknown number. I picked it up. It was my little brother giving me the news of my father's demise. He passed away due to heart failure, probably due to high emotional strain, provided he already had existing problems. I felt like a murderer. I hung up the call, completely blank and numb for some time straight. Then I had a panic attack, and the next thing I remember was I woke at the medical center. Everything flashed back once again, and I had another attack. My friends were sitting beside me, they knew what had happened. I felt ashamed for reasons unknown this time. I cried and cried and cried. I was given medications and discharged. Everyone was leaving college to get to their jobs. I, on the other hand, was confused as to whether to go back home, or will they accept me, but also wanted to see my father for the last time, even though it was his dead body. I was never able to deliver the love and respect he deserved. Without uttering a word to anyone back in college, I left, no goodbyes to anyone, and I never looked back. I reach home, and everything's devastated, can't exactly remember what was going on, but I remember carrying the ashes and pouring them into some sacred reservoir. I asked my brother to give emotional support to my mother, for I didn't have the courage to. I left stating I had job interviews in other cities. Well, the truth was, I was homeless and jobless now. But I still had the degree, so I went to Bengaluru to look for a job. Well, I got one quick owing to my degree, but it was a call center kind job. While I had no complaints that time, I felt it was just the beginning and I had a long way to go. I had broken contact with every single friend I made in college, 'cause I felt utterly ashamed to talk to them. On one hand, where I was struggling to make ends meet, they were earning lakhs and crores in metropolitan cities around the globe, while some still tried calling me. Others, while they felt it was a waste of time, I believe, gave up to build contact again. I remained at the job for 2 years, living in a tenant-like house, occasionally calling it home. Every time I called, my mother broke into tears requesting me to come back home. Well, I thought she was just being emotional. Little did know she had been detected as a last-stage cancer patient and wanted to spend her remaining time with 2 of her kids. She never told me or my brother. I kept ignoring her calls. One day I received another call from an unknown number. It was my brother telling me the worst news I could hear at that time. I lost my mother as well. It was all over for me. I felt I had hit rock bottom and I couldn't accept the reality. Anyway, went back home to perform the rituals. It was the last time I visited home and was with my family. Fortunately, my brother had already gotten into a prestigious university, which was being financed by my relatives, aunts and uncles. I wished my brother good luck and left. As my cab was taking the turn to the other road, I looked back for the last time, saw my helpless brother standing, and had flashbacks of all the amazing times we spent when he was just a little kid. Well, for me, he was still a little kid. Wanted to hug him, but I restrained myself 'cause I thought he might hate me. But I remember when the last time I looked into his eyes, he wanted me to stay. I too wanted to stay with him as an emotional support, but with little to no money, I didn't want to be a burden to my relatives, fearing they might abandon us altogether. Hence, I left. Enough of the past, let's get to the present. As I said, I left my job and am now planning to leave the city, but nowhere to go. My degree is of no use currently as I'm 30 years old. Everyone wants a skilled guy to work at their company at this age. Well, my brother never contacted me since that day, nor did I. I didn't want to be that useless guy who would waste his precious time, though my heart was dying to talk to him. Anyway, I got to know that he got placed in a company with a great package abroad. I felt happy for him and I hope he gets a wonderful life ahead, forgetting all the nightmares he faced at such a young age. Well, what now for me, moving on to the next phase of life. Bye and see you again in the next videos and stories.